Alrighty, what is going on? So I was going through the catalog of my old videos, and I noticed that this video, the one that I uploaded previously, had a lot of room for improvement on it. So a combination of me being more experienced and bored, I thought I'd go back and just redo this video. Most of my opinions are going to stay roughly the same, though there will be some changes here and there. But for the most part, I just wanted to release this video because I know there's so much improvement that could have been done over the last one. So, I mean, as the title suggests, we're going to be doing a top 10 ranking of the Game of Thrones episodes because I got nothing else to do. And like before, we're going to have some honorable mentions and then do the top 10, and I'll explain my reasoning behind each placement. Placements will depend overall on how important each episode is to the show, obviously the entertainment value that they provide, and also just little key moments that I think deserve attention. And also, the entire runtime is going to be accounted for, so there will be a few episodes, but a few episodes where they have like one key moment, but the rest of the episode you can't really remember much. They will be ranked according to that criteria. So with all that being said, let's just get right into this. We're going to start with the honorable mentions, of which there will be 5 of them. So here's number 15.
15. Burger King foot lettuce.
No. Number 15 is Kissed by Fire, Season 3, Episode 5. Alright, now, the main reason I think this episode deserves a big shout out is because of the scene where Jaime and Brienne are in the bathhouse, right? And he's describing about the events that unfolded when he killed the Mad King. And the reason that scene is so important is because that changes Jaime from an antagonist to somebody who's just littered with gray. And it makes him such a more interesting character to watch going forward. And that's the main reason this episode is on here. But aside from that scene, there's still a lot of interesting things that happen. You have the fight with the Hound and Beric, and you get introduced to this magical aspect with Beric coming back to life, and that's also just an entertaining fight to watch. And then you have another thing where Rob has to kill Santa Claus, whatever the fuck his name is. And the little confrontation leading up to that has my favorite line in the entire show.
The Kingslayer. They were his king.
They were boys! Look at them.
Yeah, that one. So yeah, I mean, the main reason this episode is here is because of the Jaime and Brienne scene. But I mean, the episode as a whole, it still has, just small, not really noteworthy, but just still interesting and, fun little interactions between the characters that we all know and love. So yeah, number 15, Kissed by Fire. I think it's a good one. Now I'm putting first of his name here for one reason and one reason only. And that is because of Carl fucking Tanner. Okay? Nobody, and I mean nobody, talks about this character. Most people don't even know that this is a fucking character in the show, and that breaks my heart. It breaks my little heart. This guy is awesome. Okay? Nothing really happens in this episode, but the ending, when Jon and the rest of the Night's Watch go to Craster's Keep and they have a little tussle with the deserters. Oh, that is my bread and butter. And seeing Carl Tanner just completely own fucking Jon, it is just delightful. Nobody talks about the character of Carl Tanner, and that's a shame. So I'm putting this episode here just to gush about how amazing this guy is. I got nothing more to say. This guy's awesome. He's the only reason why it's here. So this episode's really easy to place why it's here because the reason is in the title of the episode. I mean, the reason we all remember this episode is because of the fight between Oberyn and the Mountain. And the reason it's at 14 and not anywhere higher is because aside from that, there isn't really that much of noteworthy in this episode. Things that are still significant but aren't as entertaining from a show's perspective. I mean, you have things like Ramsay being legitimized and Dany figuring out the truth about Jorah and how he betrayed her. Those things are significant, sure, but they're not at a point to where a watcher will remember that episode for that scene, because I had to look that up while making this video to make sure that they were actually in this episode, and they are. But the reason people remember this episode is because of the fight between Oberyn and the Mountain. Now let's talk about the fight. The fight is fucking fantastic. I don't know if I'd say it's the best fight in the show, but it is damn near close. And it's a weird fight because it teeters the line between being like the death of Oberyn being totally out of left field and totally expected. So while you're watching it, you're teetering between what outcome you think is going to happen. You think you know what's going to happen, and then they change it. And we all know he eventually loses.
Elia Martell. I killed her children. Then I raped her. Then I smashed her head in like this.
That's a lot of damage.
And that affects, a lot of characters moving forward. So this episode, while the main point of it is really only like the last few minutes of it, the entertainment value in that scene alone, plus of the significance it has afterwards, I think is enough for it to get at least an honorable mention. Yeah. An episode from season 8 is in a video about the good things about Game of Thrones. Now, okay. Let's sit down, let's have a chat about the long night. Does this episode have problems? Yep. Is it fucking dark? Uh-huh. Does it still have good things in it? Oh, yeah. So, okay, let's go over a few things. One, this is probably my biggest positive for Season 8. The scene where Jorah finally dies. Now, I love Jorah, okay? I would have loved to have seen him be alive, but I knew going into Season 8 he was destined to die. And they gave him the most perfect death that he could have gotten. And that made me happy. Theon also, I think he could have at least hit the Night King once. But he also had a great send-off. And I guess the most decisive or divisive moment is Arya killing the Night King. That in itself I don't have a problem with. I just wish either A, the Night King could have had more exploration into his character about his motivations and such, or Jon could have at least had a little tussle with him, or both. I don't give a shit. But yeah, and then you had a few other cool things. A little horror-y stealth scene I think was pretty interesting. And the action itself, the feat of this episode, the amount of production that went into this episode, I have to respect. This is a gigantic episode. I just wish we could have seen it. But lastly, and I know people talk about this, which is nice because it deserves credit, but this episode I think has the best song that Game of Thrones has ever done. Okay, the Night King's theme, it's the goods. Yeah, it gives me chills just listening to that amazing song. I've listened to that song more times than I care to admit. So, yes, like everything in season 8, there are problems, glaring problems even. But I have to at least recognize that among the episodes, if I'm rewatching the series, I'm at least going to be excited to get to this episode, and it's saying something. So whatever, I don't give a shit. I enjoyed this episode.
Mother! Get down!
Now this episode hurts for me to place it here because I know it's just a byproduct of my fucking ape brain, but this episode is split into, I guess, two little flavors. One, you have a very, very good battle. And then you have Cersei talking to Sansa about things. And I know I should like the Cersei and Sansa things, but my ape brain just wants battle. So it's split for me. On one hand, I fucking love this episode. On the other hand, I hate when I see Sansa's face because I want to see battle. And I don't like that I have that opinion. I wish I liked the Cersei and Sansa scenes more, but it always felt to me, it felt jarring because it was such a hard kind of cut. They'd go from insane action to somber dialogue. And I don't know. I mean, maybe if they cut it better, I'd like it more, but I don't know. This one, I hate that I have this opinion, but what the hell. Fuck it. It's here.
Fuck the King's Guard. Fuck the city. Fuck the king.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never.
So I actually left this episode out of my original top 10 list, and I'm really pissed at myself for doing that, because this is a solid episode. Really, it's here for two main scenes, and a feat, actually, that I didn't think was possible. We'll discuss that in a little bit. Firstly, though, you have the death of Jorah Mormont, and this guy just goes out like a badass. But then the other main thing is the ending of this episode, and the incredible feat that I didn't think was possible, because this episode made me like Daenerys. Now, if you don't know anything, just know this: I hate Daenerys. I think she is one of the worst would-be rulers Westeros could ever have. I think she is entitled and makes poor decisions. However, in this episode, yeah, I'd get behind her. That came out wrong. I would follow her, yes. If she kept going with what they established in this episode, I would have turned to a Daenerys fan. Now they didn't, so I'm not, but this episode actually made me like Daenerys for a little bit. And also this episode introduced Ramsay. A little smaller thing, but it introduced Ramsay. And Ramsay is one of my favorite characters, so that's a small little plus. But yeah, this episode is here because it did the impossible. It made Daenerys cool.
Shay. Please don't.
Why is the Laws of Gods and Men at number 9? Well, I'm sure you already know. The Trial of Tyrion Lannister. Now, there are, of course, some other things that happen in this episode. Not enough to where the average viewer would remember it based on them, but still interesting. I love seeing Oberyn on the small council, because he's so charismatic, and you can tell he just doesn't give a shit about any of this. And then you also have a fight between Yara and Ramsay, which makes no sense with Ramsay being shirtless and fighting. But I don't give. It's the most outlandish fight in the entire show, and I don't care at all that it is outlandish. It's just so it's so in his character that it doesn't make any sense. I don't know. It's entertaining. I'm getting ahead of myself. The Trial of Tyrion Lannister. This scene alone earned Peter Dinklage an Emmy, and I can easily see why. You could see so much pain and anger that Tyrion has towards his father and to Shay. And it's so well written, and it's so it if he didn't do this, we wouldn't have basically the rest of the show. I mean, maybe you could have a spin-off of Jon and Tyrion at the wall, but this episode is so significant because without this scene, most of the show wouldn't have happened. And that, my friends, is significant. So yeah, I mean this scene, it's so fucking bloody fantastic, so that's why it's here. There you go.
The Lannisters send their regards.
Oh boy. I can feel it already. I can feel the hate coming for placing this episode only at number 8 when many would consider it to be the best episode. So let me defend myself, I guess, real quick. And I'm gonna do it with a nice simple quiz. Can you tell me anything else that happens in this episode besides the Red Wedding? What's that? Oh, you can't. Oh. Yeah, that's why it's at number 8. So, why does it get number 8 if it's so forgettable? Well, because the Red Wedding is perhaps the most significant scene. Actually, significance is probably not the right word. It is the most impactful scene of the entire series. It is the most well-known scene, and it has caused thousands of people to literally break down. And a scene that is able to do that is doing something right. All right. So yes, I do believe this episode is actually quite overrated. The scene it's famous for, that is not overrated at all. That scene is exactly where it should be in terms of recognition. But the episode as a whole just isn't as good as episodes that are more entertaining throughout their entire runtime. If that makes any sense whatsoever. So yeah, that's why I think it's definitely deserves top 10. I just don't think it deserves to be, say, in like the top 5 or something like that.
So, Jaime,
Rick on.
dick on.
This episode I like to think of as the last great episode of the series, which sucks because there's a whole other season afterwards. But this episode, I feel they still had it. There are some problems, yes, in that it is so inconsequential. Nothing of note happens other than Jaime realizing, uh-oh, dragons bad. We can't beat dragons. That is the biggest takeaway from this episode. I mean, aside from, I guess, Arya coming back to Winterfell, that I guess is significant. But aside from if at least one character that had a name died this episode, it'd be ranked a lot higher. But aside from that, this episode is entertaining as hell. I mean, this is pretty much the first time we've seen dragons go up against a formidable army. And as we quickly learn, it doesn't give a shit what kind of formidability you have. Dragon win. And it's entertaining as fuck. sometimes episodes can just be entertaining, and this is one of those episodes. It's just fucking entertaining. Boom. There you go. I think in terms of significant episodes, this one is perhaps the most significant. Not only for the characters within the show, but for the show as a whole. Before this episode, it was, just a pretty good medieval drama with some mystery and fantasy elements. Nothing really spectacular about it. But then they pull the rug out from under you and they kill the main character before the first season's even over with. As soon as that sword went down, people began to take notice. And it changed this show from, that pretty good medieval drama to the medieval drama. And then going into the world with the characters, you still feel Ned's death through the characters, even in fucking season 7 and 8. That is how much his death has affected these characters. A lot of times when characters die, you're sad for that episode. Maybe you get one more episode to mourn if they're really good, but you really don't feel their presence 8 seasons down the line. For Ned, you do. I don't know, this episode, it was such a big risk, but it's a risk that they needed to take, and it thoroughly paid off for them. Great episode. Great, and it really showed us what we were in for with this show.
We're not doing it your way.
Tywin Lannister's fucking death.
You shot me. You're no son of mine. I am your son. I have always been your son.
Oh, and also you have Brienne fighting the Hound, which is probably the best fight scene in the entire show. It doesn't go for flash. It doesn't try to be too artsy. It's two people trying to kill each other, and it's amazing. And also, you do have one of the best final shots of a season. Not really in the scope of it or the technical prowess of it, but it's just a shot that always gets me hyped to see the next season. When Arya's on the boat and whatever song it is, I try finding that particular piece of score. But the final song in this episode, it always gets me hyped to immediately start season 5. So for those reasons, good fucking episode, I'd say. Now, these last 4 episodes honestly could be placed anywhere. I consider all of the next 4 episodes to be 10 out of 10. Some of the best television ever put to screen. And the Battle of the Bastards is one of them. This episode has a battle scene in it that rivals $1 million budget movies, okay? And I have a fucking 8 brain. I like battles. This is a good fucking battle, okay? And then you have Sansa getting revenge on Ramsay, which is just so fucking satisfying. You have the Starks reclaiming Winterfell. Even though you have Jon's floppy sword in there, I don't care. This episode is just so fucking entertaining. Yeah, you know why it's here. Why do I need to explain this one? You know why it's here.
Now that's a lot of damage!
Oh, that scene alone just always gives me the chills. Hard Home, I think, is the best episode featuring White Walkers in it. And as much as I want to call this a battle episode, it certainly doesn't feel like one. To a certain degree, this is horror. This is a horrifying massacre that we're witnessing. And I don't think the White Walkers since had ever been as intimidating as they are in here. I mean, that final scene where Jon and the Night King are just fucking glaring each other. And then the White Walker just raises his arms ever so slightly. And then Jon just realizes he's fucked. Yeah, this episode, it showed us what the real threat in Westeros is. And I wish they would have kept going with that instead of what they did in season 8. Kind of tragic. But yeah. I love Hard Home. It's just a good fucking episode. And it showed, really quickly, it showed that Jon is both a capable leader and just a good guy. I mean, he's doing all of this to save his enemies. Think about that when you watch this episode. All of the things he's doing in this episode is to save his enemies. That's awesome.
You remember that cave? We should have stayed in that cave.
We'll go back there.
This episode for me is definitely a personal favorite. And I know I got the ape brain. I like the battle episodes, as most people do. But if I had to pick a best, solely battle episode, I'd probably pick this one as my personal favorite. And the reason is because throughout the entire runtime, there isn't a wasted scene. It is thoroughly entertaining throughout. And it's weird because in a show as big as Game of Thrones with so many different characters and settings, this episode only takes place at the Wall and Castle Black and doesn't feature any other characters besides the Night's Watch and wildlings. And how it manages to make an entire episode based solely on that setting and characters thoroughly entertaining, that is a feat in and of itself. Now, there's so many scenes I could go over that just are amazing. One thing that stands out to me is Sir Alistair and his speech that he gives as the wildlings are breaking through the gate.
Brothers! 100 generations have defended this castle. She's never fallen before. She will not fall tonight. Those are thins on our walls. They eat the flesh of the men they kill. Do you want to fill the belly of a thin tonight? No! Tonight we fight. And when the sun rises, I promise you, Castle Black will stand. The Night's Watch will stand. With me now! Now with me!
It always gets me hyped to just follow that guy into battle. That guy who we've hated for 4 seasons. We've hated this guy. To then go, yeah, I'll stand behind you. That's amazing storytelling right there. And then you have, Gren doing the Night's Watch oath right before he fights the giant.
I gather, now my watch begins.
shall not end until my death. I shall take no wife, hold no lands, father no children. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. I shall live and die by my post. I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I am the shield that guards the realms of men. I pledge my life and honor in the night's watch. For this night and all the nights to come.
And while we don't see him fighting the giant, I think it's actually better that way, because the reveal of him being dead later, but then the dead giant laying next to him, that is so powerful. And for Jon, he has tremendous character growth in this episode. When Sir Alistair falls, Jon realizes he needs to lead. Not because Jon wants to lead, but because he knows he's the only one who can at that time. He's not a person who wants power, but this is when he learns that he's the one who needs to wield it. And then even more character growth when you have the death of Ygritte, which I thought was very well done. This is just such a good episode for Jon in terms of character growth. And sadly, it's some of the last true character growth we get from him before he starts becoming the I don't want it guy. But yeah, this episode, I don't think it gets enough attention it deserves. And for that reason, I think number 2 is where it sits comfortably.
I said knock and hold, you cunts! Does knock mean draw? No, sir! Does fucking hold mean fucking drop? No, sir! You all plan to die here tonight? No, sir! That's very good to hear!
Long may she reign.
This is my number 1. My favorite episode that the show had ever done. The Winds of Winter, I like to think of it as the Game of Thrones equivalent of Goodfellas. And what I mean by that is this whole episode is just a collection of great scenes. Okay, it starts off with Cersei blowing up the Sept of Baelor, and that is just such a well-crafted scene of tension. And you get the whole payoff afterwards with the actual explosion. And then you have, what other fucking scenes do you have? You have Tommen committing suicide based on what he just saw Cersei do. You have Cersei torturing Septa Unella. And Cersei, by the way, this entire episode, she owns the screen. What other scenes do you have? You have Tyrion being named Hand of the Queen, and then Daenerys finally sailing to Westeros in that final shot. You have Jon's whole entire lineage being revealed, and then right after he gets crowned King in the North. And that scene I still think is one of the most powerful scenes that this show has ever done. And then you have Davos confronting Melisandre about burning Shireen. And that scene, I think that is some of the best acting I have ever seen. Liam Cunningham absolutely nails that scene. You have Arya killing Walder Frey and finally using her faceless assassin ability to really she's had that name on her list for so long, and it finally gets paid off in that moment, and the Red Wedding finally gets avenged. I'm still probably forgetting scenes. I mean, you also have Cersei being crowned queen. Yeah, I'm still forgetting scenes probably, but that just goes to prove my point that every single scene in this episode is amazing. Okay? So yeah, this I think is the best episode that the show has ever done. And honestly, this is a better finale than the actual finale we got. So yeah, Winds of Winter, it is my favorite episode, and I don't think the show has ever topped it.
My name is Arya Stark. I want you to know that. The last thing you're ever going to see is a Stark smiling down at you as you die.
So that's it. That's my list. Hopefully this video is better than the one I did a few months ago. Even though I still don't know what the hell I'm doing. I know a little bit more than what I did then, so yeah. Like, I guess, or comment. I don't give a shit. Alright. Goodbye.